Greetings, everybody. Let me shut my office door. All right, concept 2. Yeah, I'm recording. Okay, excellent. Concept 2, we're looking at, discuss the development of organized labor from the 1860s to the 1950s. So we're going to look at the details of radical unionism and look at the details of trade unionism between that time period. So the radical unionists rejected, as seen in the table in the last concept, they rejected corporate capitalism and the factory system with its division of labor and its sharp differentiation of the interest of employer and employee, and sought to restore a society which valued the independent artisan. Right? So they don't like the fact that there's a hierarchy within the corporate system and that the people on the bottom get paid less than subsistence wages, and there's more of a value for managers. This approach was very idealistic for the time. Radical unionists were determined not to become machine tenders assigned to a small part of the process of production. This is division of labor and the aspect of being alienated from oneself within the cogs of the corporate capitalist system. They strove to preserve their status as craftsmen, the way it used to be in the 18th and early 19th century. Examples of reform unionism, there's a couple we could look at. After 1865, the growth of national craft unions quickened. For example, iron molders, printers, and cigar makers were some of the crafts that crafts that would form unions. A federation of such unions, the National Labor Union, was created in 1866. Most of its leaders were visionaries and out of touch with the practical needs and aspirations of the workers. Later on, I'm going to show you a clip that somewhat gives you a sense of how union labor organizers might have been out of touch, or at least it was hard for them to communicate to the people they were trying to organize, that is, the workers. They opposed the wage system, strikes, and anything that increased the laborers' sense of being members of the working class. A major objective was the formation of worker-owned cooperatives. By cooperation, we will become a nation of employers, the employers of our own labor. Because the union desired basic social reform that had little to do with bargaining power, workers and employers, it eventually became a political organization, the National Labor Reform Party. When the election of 1872 proved this venture a fiasco, the organization disappeared. By far, the most important organization of radical unionism was the Noble Order of Knights of Labor, founded in 1869 by a guy named Ulrich Stevens, who was a Mason. It attempted to unite the workers of America into one big union under centralized control. Membership was open to men and women, white and black, skilled and unskilled, laborers and capitalists, merchants and farmers. Membership was not open to lawyers and bankers, professional gamblers, saloon keepers, and stockbrokers. They wanted an 8-hour workday, no strikes, and equal pay for both sexes. Incredibly radical group for its time. The purpose of this all-inclusive membership and the structural arrangements of the order was bent in the direction of political action and broad social reform. The underlying objective was the abundance of opportunity in America should be shared among all workers of hand and brain, and the mission of producing a class of society was to regain and protect this opportunity. Several factors contributed to the rapid decline of the Knights of Labor after 1886. First, the unions sought to absorb the existing craft unions to subject them to loss of their autonomy. This structural characteristic caused a great deal of internal friction. Also, the unsuccessful outcome of the Knights of Labor strike policy, which involved the craft unions in industrial strikes, which were not in their direct interests. Finally, the fallacies in the order assumptions about free market economy and the equality of rewards between hand labor and mental labor. The trade unions took on a completely different approach, as discussed before. Instead of looking for ways to be self-employed, the trade unionists organized to bargain with employers whose interests they recognized as different from their own. They saw the system as it was. As the Knights of Labor declined in membership, its place was taken by the American Federation of Labor, or the AFL, which was created in 1886. The AFL was, in philosophy, structure, goals, and tactics, the expression of a long process of evolution whose roots could be traced back to the 1790s, when the first local unions emerged in the United States. In technical language, the AFL was a trade union center, meaning that it was a roof organization. The AFL was a loose federation of about 100 national and international unions, each retaining full autonomy over the affairs of its organization. The AFL reflected the principle of unions of skilled workers on craft lines. The most powerful of these affiliates were the national and international unions, so-called because they enrolled Canadian as well as U.S. workers, such as United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners, and the United Mine Workers. The hundreds or so national and international unions which were affiliated with the AFL were composed of local unions centered in towns, cities, and countries. The AFL was to dominate the American labor scene for the next half century. Samuel Gompers, this gentleman right here, was the founder of the union and established a philosophy that labor should accept the economic system and should try to win the respect within the system. The AFL accepted the fact that most workers would remain in laboring class all their lives and try to develop in them a sense of common purpose and pride in their skills and station. Gompers encouraged his supporters to make intelligent use of the ballot and voting in order to advance their own interests. The AFL refrained from supporting any single political party. It acted upon the principle that labor should reward its friends and punish its enemies, regardless of political party. And so much of what Samuel Gompers incorporated as far as strategy was business unionism. That is, we're here to accept the economic system as it is, and we only want skilled labor, so it doesn't. So we have some sort of leverage, right? So, like today, it's very difficult for someone at McDonald's or Walmart to form a union because basically anybody with a little bit of training, on-the-job training, can do those jobs, right? Not so for a carpenter, a steel worker, and other trades that require probably an apprenticeship, and you could use that as leverage, right? Because if you don't do it, well, that requires a long degree of training. The Wagner Act of 1935, also made known as the National Labor Relations Act, made it illegal for an employer to refuse to bargain with a union and allowed the federal government to intervene in relations between labor and capital in a more forceful way in order to protect labor from being deprived of their negotiating powers by big business. The act also outlawed a list of unfair labor practices, partly as a result of the Wagner Act, but also as a result of the 1937 Depression. Union membership tripled between 1933 and 1939, from 3 million to over 9 million. Because of the Wagner Act, unskilled industrial workers now had bargaining power. The AFL was then interested in organizing unskilled industrial workers, and thus created the Committee for Industrial Organization within the AFL to accomplish this goal. Oops. Okay. In 1935, John L. Lewis, who was president of the United Mine Workers, became chairman of the newly formed Committee for Industrial for the Industrial Organization, the CIO. Soon Lewis and the CIO challenged the more conservative AFL leadership policies to get more union representation and government protection for workers involved in mass production. Thus, they were expelled from the AFL in 1936 and formed their own union called the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CIO, in 1938. The CIO proceeded to organize such key industries as steel, rubber, and automobile, and reached agreements with such large corporations as U.S. Steel and General Motors. In the following years, the CIO and the AFL engaged in bitter struggle for leadership of U.S. labor. In 1955, the CIO merged with the AFL to form one union called the AFL-CIO. So in comparing the Knights of Labor with the AFL was opportunistic and practical, where the Knights of Labor was idealistic and vague in its aims. The AFL was instrumental in achieving the 8-hour workday, the 5- and 6-day work week, workmen's compensation, outlawing of the injunction, and much more. The injunction would be basically if you were on strike, it would be illegal to be on strike. The AFL has done much more to improve working conditions, but larger social questions raised by the Knights of Labor and other radical unions of the redistribution of wealth still remained open for debate. So that will conclude Concept 2, and let me know if you have any questions, and we'll be looking at Concept 3 next. So go ahead and click there as soon as you're able to.